Okay.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Absolutely. Immensely better. All right, we're up to we're on Daf Ayin Testament Aleph, about 10 lines down or so. So what did we say in the Mishnah? In the Mishnah we said Machar Ashba, Machar Zibla, V'chule. If you sell garbage, you sell a dunghill. It could be a little hill, it could be a little pit in which garbage is filled. So you've sold the garbage, you've sold the manure together with the pit. Okay, that's with respect to a sale. Now let's talk about a hekdesh transaction. If a person consecrates property, to not us, the Mishnah says in Maseches Meila, if you consecrate something that could be used as a korban, not something that could be used to make a building, like for example an ox or a lamb or a goat. You're not going to cement those into a building. Not a good idea. But you can bring those as a korban, kachem mizbeach. The better kabayis all the mizbeach, something that's something that could be used for building purposes of the Beis Hamikdash, like gold or silver or precious stones. Fine, also good. Lo the mizbeach, lo the better kabayis. If it's something that can't be used for the mizbeach, it can't be used for building maintenance either. What would that be? That would be like milk or cheese or garbage that we were discussing, like manure or weeds and grass. So those things can't be used for either purpose. Molin ben. So all of these categories, it doesn't matter whether it's for kosher mizbeach with bedek habayis. It's just something that I'm going to sell, and then I'll use the proceeds for bedek habayis. Once you consecrated them, so they're subject to me'ilah, to the halacha in the Torah of misappropriation. If somebody would use it for personal purposes, so they would have to bring a korban me'ilah. That's true not only with respect to what was consecrated, but even the contents of what was inside. So a person consecrated a dunghill, for example. So even what was the manure that was inside the dunghill is also consecrated for these purposes. Ketzad, we're going to give some examples now. If you stipulated chutz mi that you wanted to exclude it, so you could definitely stipulate it. That's a pipashtis, yeah. So hikdish por malei mayim. Once you po there, if you redeem it, so then it loses its sanctity, yeah. But it doesn't even get its sanctity to begin with if you didn't sanctify it. But we say that mistama, once you sanctify an item, you sanctify what's inside, presumably, unless specified otherwise, yeah. So hikdish por malei mayim, if you consecrated a well, a cistern that was full of water, ashbos, a dunghill, maleo zebel that was full of manure, shovak maleyonim, and dovecote that was full of doves, sadeh maleo sabim, a field that was full of weeds, a grass, ilan, a nasoi peros, or a tree that was bearing fruit, mo'olin ben mamasha b'soichan. So then the sin and transgression of me'ilah would be transgressed either through misappropriating the item itself, like if I had a well and I took off a piece of the dirt of the lining of the walls and I used it for personal purposes. Pashtus is that it has to have been removed from its mechuber state. It's not mashma that way from the Rashbam, but that's what the Rambam rules. And also with respect to the manure or the water that's inside, if you use that for personal purposes, you would also be guilty of milah. But you consecrated a cistern, and then afterwards it only filled up with water. The water was only brought afterwards. You consecrated a dunghill or a dung pit, and then only afterwards you filled it up with manure. The dovecote and the doves only came home afterwards. They only came to roost afterwards. The tree, and only afterwards the fruit started to grow on the tree. A field, and only afterwards the grass sprouted. So then in the field itself, and the tree itself, and the dovecote itself, they are subject to milah, but not or came into those items afterwards. Not the doves and not the water and not the grass. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. How do I know it's what Rabbi Yehuda says? Not because the Mishnah tells me it's what Rabbi Yehuda says. We're quoting a Mishnah over here, but the Mishnah Me'ilah doesn't say Rabbi Yehuda's name. It's just that our Gemara had a tradition. It's Rabbi Yehuda. It's important because if it would be without a name, it would just be the Chachamim. So we paskin like the Chachamim. But once we know it's Rabbi Yehuda, so now we see Rabbi Yossi is going to disagree in part. So whenever we have a machlokas, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, the halakha is like Rabbi Yossi because Rabbi Yossi nimuko imo. He's somebody who got to the heart, to the depth of the matter whenever he argued about something. So he beats out Rabbi Yehuda. So that's important that we know that it's Rabbi Yehuda. So what does Rabbi Yossi say? Rabbi Yossi Omer, Amagdish is a sadav as a Elon, that when it comes to these two different items, namely if you consecrate a field or a tree, Bolin Behen Uvigiduleim, you are guilty of Me'ilah with respect to the item itself and whatever grows in it afterwards, because Gidule Hekdesh she treats like Hekdesh. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't know by that principle. He doesn't know that the growths of Hekdesh are considered like Hekdesh. However, Rabbi Yossi holds that way. That's the way we paskin. La halacha, the Rambam paskins that way. Nochas Mila. When it comes, that's only when it comes to a field or a tree. When it comes to a dunghill, the manure is not growing from the dunghill. When it comes to the dovecotes, the doves aren't growing out of the dovecotes. So in those areas, presumably Rabbi Yossi would agree with Rabbi Yehuda. So Tanya, surprise that it indicates as much. Amar Rebbe said that's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Nirin divrei Rabbi Yehuda bebor v'shovach. And Nirin, so you have to add the word Nirin here. But Nirin divrei Rabbi Yossi b'sad v'hilan. That Rabbi Yehuda, we would paskin his like him. It seems like he's correct when it comes to a cistern or a dovecote, where whatever comes afterwards does not come naturally into those items. But Rabbi, we would agree. It would seem that we would hold like Rabbi Yossi beside of Elon, where the items that come afterwards automatically grow from the Sadeh or the Elon. So hi, Mai. So what does that mean? Near in this way, near in that way. Near in the Rabbi Yehuda b'bor v'shovach. So I understand the first part where we say we would paskin like Rabbi Yehuda only when it comes to bor b'shovach, how he holds that there is no consecration to what comes later on in the case of the cistern or the dovecote. So then we understand because he argues both in the case of sada of bor b'shovach and sada v'ilan. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that we never would be subject, we never would have a problem of Me'ilah with respect to what comes afterwards, because he holds that the Giduleim of the Bor and the Shovach are not subject to Me'ilah, and the Giduleim of the Sadav, since the Giduleim of the Sadav are not subject to Me'ilah, Kol Shekain, whatever comes into the Bor v'Shovach is not subject to Me'ilah, and we only hold like him with respect to the Bor v'Shovach. That I get. But to say, oh yeah, we only hold like Rabbi Yossi in the case of the Sadav Ilah, that's all that he was talking about. You mean that Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda even in the case of the Bor v'Shovach? Even in the case of the Bor v'Shovach, he would hold that what comes into these items afterwards will be subject to Milah. It's not true. Ain't so. Rabbi Yossi Sadav Ilan Kama. Rabbi Yossi only said his halach with respect to Sadav Ilan because of the principle of Idule Hekdesh Kehekdesh Dami. The Chitema, you'll say, no, he really would disagree with Rabbi Yehuda about everything, even Bor v'Shovach, and that really it was only the draw of the Rabbi Yehuda Kamer. We know that's not true. The bright, and he's only saying, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, even according to you, Rabbi Yehuda, you should agree with me with respect to the Elon and the Sadeh. That's not what's going on. Tanya, have a Bryce that says explicitly he only disagreed in the case of the Sadeh. Elon on Rabbi Yossi said, Einani, Roe Divrei Ashel Rabbi Yehuda. I don't see the words of Rabbi Yehuda. I don't see Dvarash Rabbi Yehuda, the Sadeh Elon, and it's only in the case of Sadeh Elon. I disagree. Why? Because they're the growths of Hekdesh. Whatever grows from the field that grew from Hekdesh. Whatever goes into the tree is something that grew from the tree naturally itself. So the Besad of Elon, we see Hudeina Roeh. That's where he disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda. But Bor v'Shovach Roeh. When it comes to Bor v'Shovach, there's no disagreement. So Haki Kamar, you're right. We just have to edit the words a little bit. No problem. Nirin, what it means to say is, Nirin Divin Rabbi Yehuda, that the words of Rabbi Yehuda appear to be correct, Le Rabbi Yossi, with respect to Bor v'Shovach, with respect to the Bor v'Shovach, what comes in afterwards is not a natural growth. She'af Rabbi Yossi, Lo Nekla Kolav, Rabbi Yossi only disagreed in the case of the field and the tree, because what comes afterwards is a natural growth and therefore would be subject to Milah. But Bor v'Shovach, what comes in afterwards is not natural. Modile would agree to Rabbi Yehuda that it would not be subject to Milah if the water in the bor and the doves in the shovach were not present at the time of the consecration of these items. Tana Rabbana Rabbi store, Hiktishan Reikonin. if you consecrated the items when they were empty, we're assuming right now we're talking about a sod of Elon. That assumption is going to turn out to be incorrect. But right now, that's what we're assuming. Hiktishan Reikanin, if you consecrated these items when they were empty, and afterwards they filled up, Molin man, so then you would be guilty of milah if you misappropriate the items themselves, but not the water, but not, let's say, if we're talking about an Elon Rasadeh, not the grass or the trees that would grow afterwards. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Omer. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says, no, nothing doing. You would be guilty of milah even in respect to what grows afterwards, even though they only came in afterwards. So I'm a Rabbah. So Rabbah originally said, Machlokes besad of Elon. What they're disagreeing about is the case of the field and the tree, and it's the same machlokes that we just read between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. The Tanakama of this particular brisa holds like Rabbi Yehuda. It's easy to remember because it's in the same order. He holds Rabbi Yehuda, and that's the reason why you would not be guilty of milah with respect to what grows on the tree in the field afterwards. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Savalak, Rabbi Yossi, held like Rabbi Yossi, Gidule Hektesh, Kehektesh, and therefore that's why you'd be guilty of milah with respect to the trees and the grass that grow afterwards. Abal, but if we're dealing with the case of the bor b'shovach, the cistern / well, and the dovko, everybody would agree. Molin b'hen, there would only be milah with respect to what was originally consecrated, and not what came afterwards, because that's the case here. The case here is so Amalei Abaye says that presupposition is belied by what comes afterwards. Brisa says if when you were makdish these items, they already were filled up, right, with whatever's inside. So then so then the Tanakama says, well, in that case, you are going to transgress me'ilah, even with respect to what was inside at the time of consecration. That we get. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, machlif. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, however, says that in this particular case, even though he held that when the items came afterwards, you are going to be subject to me'ilah. He says in this case, when the items are already inside, you're not going to be subject to me'ilah. No way that he would say that with respect to a Sad of Elon. Sad of Elon, he even holds that Kidule Hekdesh like Hekdesh. If it's already inside, it already grew in the Sad and the Elon, for sure. He would have to agree that what was inside at the time of consecration would be subject to Hekdesh. No way would he reverse his Shita. Biba Sad turn the page. That's what the Gemara says. Biba Sad of Elon, if that's what we're talking about, is a field and a tree. My machlif, how could he go in the reverse direction and say, oh, well, if it was already there, it's not going to be consecrated. Doesn't make sense. Rather, Rabbah says, machlokes bebor b'shovach. The machlokes between the Tanakama on the one hand and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon on the other hand, is only in the case of the bor and the shovach, where they disagree, both in a case where the items with the water or the dove coats or the doves came afterwards, and they disagree when the water and the doves were there to begin with, about for various reasons that we're about to explain. About besad of Elon, but if it's the case of the field of the tree, Tivrei Akol, everybody agrees that whether the grass had already grown and the fruits had already grown, or whether the grass and the fruits are only going to grow afterwards, Tivrei Akol, everybody would agree with Rabbi Yossi that Molin Mehen Uvamash B'Soichad, that you'd be guilty of me'ilah, not only if the grass or the trees had already grown at the time of consecration, but even if they grow afterwards, because we would say Gidule Hekdesh Kehekdesh. But in the case of the bor and the shovach, they disagree in the two different cases. In the case of a bor v'shovach, Reikanim might pligi remain, Malayanim might pligi. So what do they argue about when, in fact, the items when they were consecrated didn't have anything inside? That's when they were rekonin, and the items inside only came afterwards. And what are they arguing about when it was Malayan, where suddenly Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon reverses course, and he says in the case of Malayan, then you would not consecrate the item. So Berekonin, they're arguing as follows. Berekonin pligi beplukta to Rabbi Meir Rabbanan. When it's only afterwards that in this particular case the water would come inside or the doves would come inside, so then they're arguing in the machlokes of Rabbi Meir Rabbanim. The Tanakama here in this brisa who says that it would, in fact, not be consecrated. And he holds like the Chachamim, who are of the general opinion to Amri. A person cannot transfer if they are making an acquisition, a transaction. They can't transfer something that was not already in the world. You sell the trees, so you're not selling the fruit that has not yet grown on the tree. For example, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, Savak Rabbi Meir, he holds like Rabbi Meir. To Amar is of the opinion, as we know, a person can't transfer possession of something that has not yet come into the world. Like, for example, you sell a tree, so you've also sold the fruit, even though the fruit have not yet come into the world. The case of Rabbi Meir that he speaks about, that we actually have in the Gemara, is where a person says to a woman, here, take a ring, and you're hereby betrothed to me. I am not Jewish, don't worry. It'll take effect as soon as I convert. Or she's not Jewish, and he says this will take place, this kiddushin, as soon as you convert. So Meir says, no problem, even though it hasn't happened yet, it's about to happen. So when it happens, so then everything is going to be effective. So Amor the Shamas Le the Rabbi Meir. So the later authorities, including Rav Huna in particular, said that we would apply Rabbi Meir's din even to a case of where somebody sells a tree, and therefore the fruit of the tree are also included in the sale because they are eventually going to grow from the tree. But all these cases are where it's about to happen. Even the case Tosas explains of Gerus and the Shechor, a person's being freed from being an Eved, are when there have been assurances made already that the Shechor is going, the emancipation will take place. The person's already in the Gerus application process with the CRC, and we know that things are going well. So that's when Rabbi Meir says his din. So we understand that in such a case where it's about to happen, like where it would be a fruit tree where the fruits are going to clearly grow from the tree that's in progress. So we understand Rabbi Meir says that's included. Honey, but here we're not talking about the tree and the field. We're talking about the bor v'shovach. We're talking about a cistern. So who says that water is ever going to come into the cistern? And who says in the case of the dovecote that the doves are ever going to come into the dovecote? Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon would say that those are considered to be consecrated as well. Honey, mi'emer to asu. Who says that they're ever going to come? So Amarava, no. We're talking about a case where it is inevitable and understood that they're going to come. We're talking about a cistern that's all the way at the bottom of where there are running streams. And we understand the running streams from up above are going to make their way into the cistern inevitably. Bionim, in the case of the doves, is where Abayim Derek Shovko the Shovach, where there already is another dovecote that he has in the property with lots of doves that are also breeding. And when they have their children, little doves, the little doves are going to have to go somewhere else. So they're going to naturally go to the dovecote, which happens to be next door, so that they can get free babysitting. And when the case was with a bor v'shovach, which is filled to the brim, where we said Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon reverses the sheet, and in that case, the Tana Kama says that what's inside, of course, gets consecrated. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says, of course not. What's inside is not included in the consecration. So what in the world's going on there? What's the nature of that machlokas for my pligim? So Amar Rabbah, so Rabbah now explains, we have to change the girsa, that it's according to the Marashal, not Rabbah, but Rabbah, Kigon Shehikdish Abur Stam, where we're talking about where the person simply says, I'm consecrating the cistern. And the question is, what did he mean? Did he mean only the cistern? Or did he mean even the water which is inside of the cistern? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Savala Kabua. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon holds like his father, Rabbi Shimon, you may remember from the previous parak, who said that if you sell something, you sell it ba'ayin raw, not like Rabbi Akiva. When you sell something, you're selling the bare minimum to the purchaser. And when you're makdish, it's exactly the same. Even when you're consecrated to hekdesh, same idea. You're only consecrating the bare minimum. And therefore, his father, he holds like his father, like son. Why not? To Amar done in din gavo midin hedyo. That whatever is the din with respect to a sale, namely that you're mocher ba'ayin ra, it's also true with respect to a consecration, that you're makdish ba'ayin ra as well. Ma din hedyo matzi amar. Just like in the case of the hedyot, if a person sells a cistern, he could say, I only sold the cistern, but I didn't sell the water. Bira zvini lach, maya lo zvini lach. Avdin gavoa, bira aktish, maya lo aktish. So when he consecrates, you could say, I consecrated the cistern, but not the water. But ask the Gemara, did Hedyo low? However, in this particular case, doesn't everybody agree that when you sell in the regular course a cistern, doesn't everyone agree that you also sell the water that's already inside? Isn't that what our Mishnah says? That's not the Mishnah said, Macha bor, Macha memav. So Amarava, no. According to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and this is true according to everybody, that shita in our Mishnah is a shitas yachid. So he sells, well, he holds that we hold like the shitas rabbim. Masnisa in our Mishnah is only going like Rabbi Nasan. Yechidai, the Tanya Bryce says, Macha bor lo macha memav. According to the Brisa version, the Shitas Chachamim is that you haven't sold the water, not included in the sale. And therefore, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon would say the same thing with respect to a consecration. And Rabbi Nasan, who's the Shitas Yachid, he's the one who says that in a regular sale transaction, if you sold the cistern, you've sold the water. Halacha l'maaseh. Now that we know our Mishnah is a Shitas Yachid, do we not hold like our Mishnah? That's what the Mechaber says. Nama says, like the Rashbam over here. No. Once it's codified as our Mishnah, even though it's a Shitas Yachid, nonetheless, that's halacha l'maaseh. Normally speaking, if you do sell a cistern, you sell the water which is inside. Everybody should have a wonderful day. Okay, bye-bye.